This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Tyder and my guest today is Elizabeth Rachel Prats. Elizabeth is an award-winning integrated marketing professional. She's going to tell us more about that. And she is a well-being advocate and a founder of ElizabethRachel.co, where she helps career girls fuse spirituality and practicality. Hi, Liz. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so very much for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. Tell me more about all of this. Tell me more about what integrated marketing is for my listeners who don't know it. And tell me more about your company and your ElizabethRachel.com.
Of course, yeah. So an integrated marketing. Well, it usually means that I work on some of those big campaigns that people see. I got my start in communications and public relations, working with companies like Hilton, Disney on Ice, even the Ringling Brothers Circus, basically executing national TV interviews with Steve Harvey, the national morning show, Despierta America, and things of that nature. And now it has evolved over the years. And I do a lot of work in the social media space with influencer marketing and things of that nature. And then my personal passion project is ElizabethRachel.co. It was one of those instances where I saw a lot of friends and myself, career women, looking for, ways to lead like a balanced and a flexible life. And it seemed that every time we'd go and we'd be looking for resources for those like mid-career women, the ones who, were in leadership positions, but not quite yet at the C-suite level, you'd see a lot of advice out there that was a little woo-woo. Everything was start a side hustle, quit your job and just travel the world. And it seemed like the only answer to have balance in your life was to quit your job and travel the world as a blogger or an influencer. And I just feel as though there was a need in the market for something that really catered to career girls that just wanted some of that spirituality, but they wanted it to be practical. So that's kind of how that came about.
I love that. I wish I met you when I was 33 and went through my through my burnout experience in my corporate job, because there didn't exist. This kind of advice or support did not exist back then. It was either you're full-on corporate, hardworking person, or you give everything up, as you say, and go travel the world if you can. So that's awesome that you do that. Do you coach? What do your services look like?
So right now, I actually don't coach. I like to just consider myself a well-being advocate. I provide a lot of really great free content. I've got a podcast. It's called Manifestation Lizified by Elizabeth Rachel. I do have a really great product that's called Your Vision, Your Reality. It's basically a workbook and a guided audio, and it's really designed to help you get clear with the life that you want to lead. And one of my favorite aspects is that it really asks you to dive deep into 3 scenarios and just to kind of really get clear in your mind of what it is that you want. Because, sometimes we're like, wouldn't it be great to go, be on a beach in Spain and work for a company in Madrid? Wouldn't it be great to join that nonprofit that I've been eyeing because I'm passionate about it? And it allows us to just kind of start exploring those ideas and seeing which one actually resonates with us and aligns with our quote unquote soul purpose, what we think really matters to us from a values perspective. So that's something that I have cooking right now. I don't currently offer coaching services, but it might be something coming down the pipeline.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Liz, let's talk about Mama Aida. Tell me more about Mama Aida.
All right. Well, my mom is actually a Cuban immigrant. She came here, oh my goodness, when she was maybe 13 or 14 years old, and she was fleeing the Fidel Castro regime. She ended up leaving Spain. She lived in Madrid until about age 13 or 14, and that's when she made it to the U.S., and she ended up growing up in New Orleans. So she was like, a Cuban in the South, which was really interesting. And she's actually a reading comprehension specialist and a teacher in the state of Florida right now.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me, because we very often take things for granted with history and everything, and we forget how long ago it was. Can you tell me a little bit more about Cuba and Fidel Castro and why people escaped?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So in the early, like it was like 1959 or so, Fidel Castro came into power. He had promised Cubans that he would overthrow Batista, which he did.
And that was?
Batista, he was the former kind of dictator authority figure in Cuba at the time. He overthrew him. What ended up happening is little by little, a lot of the liberties we enjoy here in the United States were taken away for Cubans. You know, neighbors turned on neighbors. It was a very communist regime. Food became scarce. Milk, eggs, things were hard to come by. It was a very, very tough period for a country that was once very lucrative. You know, I was actually just reading the other day, some of like the hottest Paris fashions were available in Cuba before they were even available in the United States. US and Cuba had such a great relationship. And, you know, if you look at pictures nowadays of Cuba, all the travel and leisure will be like, oh my goodness, it's like time has just stopped in the 1950s. And people find that fascinating today as travelers. But think about what must occur to really stop a country from progressing. And it stays literally in history because they can't progress and move forward.
How did people escape? So people were unhappy with the communist regime as we know it from Eastern Europe. Cuba is an island. What does that mean for living the country?
There were a lot of different ways that people left. I can tell you how my parents left. So my grandfather on my mother's side, he originally was a banker. He had a really cushy, great bank job. And suddenly he was being asked if he didn't mind moving the family to Russia.
From Cuba to Russia, that's quite a move.
Yes, and he realized something funky was going on. He didn't really like the direction that things were going, and he actually declined it. After he declined it and he put in a request to exit the country, he was sent to El Campo. Basically, he was put in a camp, a sugar cane camp. So he went from being a banker to cutting sugar cane out in the fields. He was allowed to visit his family once a month, but that was about it. So he had to, quote unquote, pay his dues before his family was allowed to leave Cuba. And so he did that. I don't recall for how long. I think it was at least for over a year to 2 years, something along those lines. And, and at the same time, my grandmother had to make ends meet. My mom's youngest sister was just a baby. Food, as I mentioned, was scarce. And the little girl, my aunt, she had a milk allergy. So my grandmother was having trouble feeding her until, there was a neighbor's goat. She was able to tolerate the goat milk. However, one day the goat jumped a fence and hurt herself. So they were unable to get milk from the goat anymore. So my grandmother actually ended up joining the Cuban black market and selling things like nail polish made from formaldehyde and melted down tires and the tops for the pressure cookers, las ollas. Those things were so hard to come by that they were part of the black market in Cuba. And so she would sell that. And the way she would do it is she would kind of sit in a rocking chair in front of the house. And like I mentioned, in Cuba, they were turning neighbors against neighbors. So you didn't have high-tech security. It was your neighbors would tell on you if they saw you behaving in a way that was against the communist regime. And so, she would sit on her porch and she'd rock. And she had a friend who would come by, give her a basket. I don't really recall what was in the basket. I think it was like thread and needles and things of that nature is what they made it seem like. But in actuality, she was passing her things like the nail polish and the pressure cooker top lids, etc. And so she was selling that on the sly. And I remember my mom telling me that when my grandfather found out what she was doing, he was so angry because what she was doing could have jeopardized them leaving the country and made him being in the sugarcane field for naught. However, she also was like, well, I need money to be able to take care of the two girls because he was no longer a banker. They could, so it was just a really interesting cycle of what they went through in order to leave. My dad, actually, though, his family had a really interesting process for leaving. So there was something called the Peter Pan program. They called it the Pedro Pan. My dad wasn't part of this particular program, but he was part of a similar one. And basically what it is that they will work through the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church would shuffle, I believe it's young boys out, and they would send them to a monastery, eventually send them to the US, and they could bring their parents into the United States. Now, my dad was 6 years old when he was sent to a Catholic monastery in Spain. However, if you ever met my father in real life, as an adult now, you would understand the story perfectly. He was very impatient. He was like, I can't be sitting here waiting. My grandparents live in New York. I don't need to wait. Like, I need to go. So he actually, at the age of 6 years old, he made it to Madrid, Spain. He made it to the monastery, and then he ran away. You know, I remember him telling me this story, and he was running. And, you know, he's like, it was forever. He was like, it was nighttime. I didn't know where I was going. And he found the US embassy, and that's where he went. Now that he's older and he went back, he did say, okay, it was only about 2 blocks, but it felt really long to a 6-year-old. What's really cool is he wouldn't leave until they got the US ambassador to talk to him. And eventually the US ambassador did. And he explained to him that I cannot stay here. I need to get to my grandparents in New York. And my dad would not take no for an answer. And so this man just said, okay, all right. You know, the next morning he had bought my dad breakfast. My dad had breakfast. And then a week later he had new toys, and he was on a flight to New York, and he was able to meet his grandparents. And he actually was raised and lived with them for a few years until his mother was able to come over. And by that time he even had another brother.
Amazing stories. Amazing what people go through. And it's our parents' generation. It's not long ago.
It's not long ago at all, if you think about it. It's really not.
Yeah,
and I'm first generation.
I know. So let's go back to Mama. So she was first in Spain, and then she moved to the US. Where did she then grow up in the US? How did she meet your dad?
So they both actually ended up meeting and growing up in New Orleans. So they met through mutual friends there in New Orleans.
And they had you and...
They had me and my brother, Kyle. Yes.
And your mom became a teacher.
So my mom married my father, and my mom actually followed in her father's footsteps and became a banker. She had me, then she had my brother, and after my brother, she actually was up for a promotion to branch manager, but decided to give that up because she wanted to raise the kids on her own with my father at the time. And so she ended up eventually changing career paths and becoming a teacher because she felt that the schedule was better from a flexibility standpoint as a mom.
Is there anything more you'd like to share about her, or should we jump into what you've learned from her?
I think let's jump into the lessons that I've learned from her.
Let's do.
So, you know, I talked a little bit about how she came from Cuba. Again, I'm first generation Cuban American. You know, she moved here at a time, you know, they could leave and they had nothing to bring with them. So the number one thing that she taught me was that education was key. What was interesting, though, is while they were living in New Orleans, you know, her parents still wanted to do whatever they could to ensure that she had a really great life as well as her sister. They wanted to make sure that, you know, here she was coming to a new country at the age of 13 or 14. She had to learn English. They held her back for a grade, you know, all those different things just to kind of help her get ahead and do what she needed to do. And so they were able to enroll her in a private Catholic school. I did ask her because I was like, how could they have afforded a private school for you? And she said that in New Orleans, there are a variety of private schools available, and she was on the lowest tier. So just to give you a little example, in 1974, that was about $60 a month for both her and her sister. Can we talk about inflation there? Yeah. I know, right?
Inflation and change in prices.
Exactly. I'm like, $60 a month for two children? All right,
well,
Mom.
I think that would be 100 times more right now.
Exactly.
It would be $6,000 for 2 kids.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, she got a scholarship by helping out the teachers, cleaning the classrooms, dusting the erasers and doing things like that after school. And she just, you know, this was kind of a pivotal moment for her because she said that being able to go to a private school, she got to see how other kids lived. And, you know, my grandmother was very much like, we keep a clean house. We are presentable. You know, they were humble, but they really made an emphasis on just being clean and tidy and always presenting yourself in the right possible way. And so she said that she actually ended up dating a guy from one of the most expensive private schools in the area of New Orleans. And she said that when she was going out with him, she actually got an opportunity to go to the mayor's house. And that was really interesting for her because she said it really opened her eyes and she started to connect the dots. She asked him, okay, how is it that they can afford a house like this? What is it that they do? And little by little, she started to connect the dots. She's like, oh, they're in politics. Okay, they're lawyers. Oh, okay. And she realized that the biggest commonality was that they all went to school, particularly to university. And as you know, during that time period, not everyone went to university. But so for her, that pretty much solidified it. And she was able to kind of see that there were other opportunities out there if you were willing to learn and really put your head to the books. Another lesson that she taught me was also, and this one was a really tough one, was not to put your career aspirations on hold, especially not for a man. And this was something that she taught me later in life. You know, like I mentioned, she was originally in banking. And this is something that she really enjoyed. She really loved. Growing up as a kid, my mom always had her little office space. She had the printer. She really liked that stuff. It was, yeah, exactly. And so, you know, what was really interesting is just the fact that, you know, like I said, she got pregnant. She had a potential promotion to branch manager, et cetera, coming up. And really at the end of the day, she realized that she didn't want to be forced to beg for time off to be with her family, because one thing that she had always been taught, and I think this is a little bit ingrained in the Cuban culture, is just the fact that, you know, at the end of the day, family, it should come first, is what she was always taught. It's what she learned. And I think for many women of that era and of that decade, that's really what they learned and were taught. She was like, I was 29, 30. Oh my goodness. My mom was about my age when she had my brother. This is insane.
No. Don't think like that. When we start doing the math, yeah,
let's not. But yeah, so
let's not do that.
Yeah, but she gave up the promotion. And basically, at the end of the day, it really wasn't easy. She told me in the beginning, and she's like, you know, I loved you and your brother. I did, you know, and I did not want someone else shaping you guys' minds. So, you know, in the very beginning, she's like, I wanted to be there for you. I wanted to be there for your brother. But she's like, dear God, I was changing diapers from dusk to dawn. And so eventually she decided to enroll in like an online MBA. And she was like, I was so proud. She was like, I had gotten straight A's. She's like, I had 18 credits left of my MBA. However, because my father was the original breadwinner, she had to put this MBA on hold. You know, this is 1994. You know, she wasn't comfortable doing online classes. So my dad, they were living in California at the time we all were living in California at the time. And so my dad had an opportunity, and it was in Boston. There was no way that she could continue it. And, you know, while the school was beginning to offer online classes, it's not like it is today. And she told me, she's like, I didn't really have the support that I would need. Your grandparents weren't around. They normally were, but not this time. They had actually ended up moving to Florida. So she never got a chance to finish her master's. And so that's an area where she wishes that she had done it. Right now, she's a reading comprehension specialist, but she didn't feel like she reached her full potential. She loves what she does. She doesn't regret it. She's like, you know, when she talked to me about it, she told me that a job really was for a season. But at the end of the day, you know, your children's well-being is really for a lifetime, right? And it can go over multiple generations. So she told me she has no regret. But she did tell me as I got older, do not put your career aspirations on hold, especially not for a man. And I'm really happy that I haven't done that. You know, I just feel that it's really important to it's just really important to make sure that you are never reliant on someone else for your happiness, for your support, because otherwise I think that, you know, in the past, women's roles, sometimes you were behooving to a man or you were behooving to your husband. And I think it's just really important to have that sense of independence.
It is, but it's the eternal, you know, schizophrenia with mothers, where on one hand, as you said, you understand your children and your family are important, and how they grow up and how much you invest into them and how happy they are is something that continues throughout generations. But on the other hand, the question is, how much of yourself are you are you going to sacrifice for that? And that's where I think we still haven't found the answer, how to enable mothers nowadays in these first few years when children need a lot of help and support to not give up their careers, but still give their kids the attention they need. One day we're going to solve that.
No, 100%. And I know like this pandemic has kind of put a spotlight on that, right? Because
It
a lot of the
has.
working moms have been having to teach their kids at the same time while still having, and again, I don't know how it is in every single household, but it does feel that I was reading a lot of interesting pieces and articles out there that working mothers, some of them might not be going back. Like this pandemic could be really impacting how far women have come just because of that, because, they haven't been able to there's still this need to juggle and balance everything.
It's very sad. It's very sad. Yeah. The division of labor in households has still not this fair division of roles has still not happened, but it will, I'm sure, step by step. But where I absolutely agree with your mom, and I know it from my own experiences, do not put things on hold. If you have something going, like she had her MBA, the moment you put a pause on it, it will never happen. That's a very, very dangerous trap of being like, I'll pause it for now and then, one day I'll go back. You don't. Don't put things on pause.
No, 100%. And that's why I have really lately been, I want to say in the last couple of years, been of a mindset of if I want to do it, I'm just going to do it. It's one of the reasons why I launched ElizabethRachel.co. I was just, it was something that I had been thinking about for a while. And finally I just said, let me just do it. Let's just do it and see what happens. And I think that's how you have to go about it. And speaking of, that brings me to the third lesson that my mom really taught me. And this was really striving for excellence. And while she drove me a little crazy, I'm not going to lie, I think I can probably thank her for some of my work ethic of what I have today. I'm sure my dad is like, hold it. I have a great work ethic. You inherited some of that from me. So let me give him credit there in case he listens to this. But yeah, what my mom taught me really was a sense of consistency and probably not leaving everything to the last minute. So like I mentioned, she was a reading comprehension specialist. She's a teacher. And when school did not give me homework in the summer, she would make some up for me. She would send me to my dad's house. Later in life, they were divorced. She would send me to his house with binders full of different lessons from math to reading to language arts, everything. And I actually mentioned to her that I was going to be coming onto this podcast. And she told me that I usually did mine pretty consistently over the summer. And she's like, you followed my recipe for success little by little. And honestly, that's how I approach my work now. I'm really not that person that likes to do things last minute. I like to break things up. I like to build upon it. I am not that person who is the night before finishing up a work assignment. No, I want to make sure that everything that I do is crafted really well and excellent to an extent. And of course, my brother, on the other hand, would wait until the last 3 days before summer was over and then do everything at once. And, this is something that she really pushed me on and she taught me. And honestly, like I mentioned, today I'm an account director at RBB Communications. That's the integrated marketing agency that I work at. I got that promotion 2 weeks ago. So I'm very, very excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And, I think that's something that my mom is really proud of just because, I'm a first generation Cuban American, and I'm in a role where I'm in a leadership position at a company that I've worked at for nearly 7 years now. So I think that's a pretty sweet thing.
Liz, please forgive me for stereotyping, but do you think this is because I spoke to one of my last interviews was a lady whose mom was from Armenia, and she was talking about this immigrants working very, very hard. Do you think that's also what it is? This immigrant mentality of let's study and let's work very, very hard because they're grateful for this new life and new opportunity that they have.
So yeah, there is this immigrant mentality that work hard, get an education, and you can move up here. But remember, America is the land built on the white picket fence, right? The American dream. That's what so many people decades ago were sold on. The American mentality, the American dream, that if you do that, if you work hard, you can, build a life and move up and all of that. And I think that's where that really stems from. Do I think that's still true today? I don't know. I think when my parents first got here, I think that was the case because I did see it. My dad worked his way up from cleaning bathrooms at restaurants, and then eventually he went on to own 150 restaurants at one point in time, and he did it without a college education. But again, I think that the world is shifting. I think things are changing. So I don't know if that mentality is the same anymore, but I do know that at least that generation of immigrants, I will say, my parents' generation, the 1970s, 60s, even the 1980s, I would say, that was a big thing. If you work hard, if you put in the work, you get the education, you can go far and you can make changes.
Liz, let's go to the trick question, which is, was there something she was not able to teach you, something you wish she did?
So you know what? I'm going to go with two things on this one, right? And one of which is, I think I started to teach her that the Cuban culture had a double standard. And she was well aware of it. But for example, Cubans are well known for being rooted in a little bit of something called machismo. It's a very masculine mentality. These instances where, Hispanic women have this portrayal that they're feisty, they're passionate, and they're strong, and they rule the house with an iron fist. But you get it? They rule the house, right? Not any other area. And so there are instances where Cuban men still have this, this need to be served their plates for dinner. And so, as I felt like it was antiquated thinking, and here I was, first generation growing up in America, and I had to really push back on that. There was no fairness in my brother having a 1 a.m. curfew and I had a midnight curfew, especially because I was the more responsible of the siblings and I was older, but when I asked my mom about it years later, she's like, it's something that was really hard for me. She's like, you're always taught women are pure. We have to protect our daughters. And she's like, this sounds terrible, but if your brother ever got a girl pregnant, I mean, it would bring shame on the family. But of course we would do everything to take care of the child. She's just like, but the shame would not be the same level as if it was you. If you had come home pregnant by some guy or something had occurred, she's like, the shame that would carry across the family would be 10 times worse because we grew up with this idea that women need to be protected, they must be pure. And she's like, and that was really hard when you were younger because, here I was trying to be fair, but I fully acknowledged and I realized that I was giving you a double standard. So little by little, I have been really making my mom question some of her cultural ideals in that regard, especially when it comes to a double standard. And then I think the last thing that she really wasn't able to teach me, and, like I mentioned, last month was when I was really able to launch that well-being site for women, ElizabethRachel.co. And I was so proud of it. And I just remember I called my mom and I was like, I finished the website. Here it is. This is what I believe in. This is what I'm passionate about. I just kind of started walking her through it. And out of nowhere, she kind of started getting a little teary and she made me cry. And she told me that perhaps I was born to help her find that inner peace, that passion, because she only wishes that she'd had the mindset and the strength to do it herself. She went through the motions, she told me, of just raising her family. She put her career on hold and she missed things along the way. And she did tell me that she didn't regret her life at all, but maybe there were things that she would have done differently. And following her passion would have been one of those things. And I know we talked about it earlier. I think she would have finished her MBA. She would have done a lot of those things. Had she felt like, if she'd been able to do that and it seemed like there was more flexibility to, she probably would have. So now, she's in the next stage of her life as a boomer and she's just thinking through what it is that she wants, what it is that she enjoys in life. And so it's not too late. And hopefully I'm able to help her and keep putting these ideas in her mind of, it's not too late. Like you can start now. What do you want to do? Take art lessons? Do it. Let's do it. So I think that's something that she wasn't able to teach me, but hopefully I've been able to teach her.
That's beautiful. And please, please, please support her in this. You should listen to my episode where I talk about my mom, because my mom, after a long break in her career, in her early 60s, my mom reinvented herself completely and started making art videos and winning awards with them and traveling to film festivals with them. So it's beautiful to hear how it's never too late. Please tell Mama Aida it's never too late. She should still follow her passion.
I love that. And I love that about your mother, like award-winning art videos. That's fantastic. And you're right.
Amazing.
It's never too late.
I hear that in many of my interviews. The last episode with my Chinese guest, her mom worked in a Chinese clothing factory 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, her whole life long. And then at 50, she started her own business. She opened a baby clothing boutique, and then she opened a second one and made a successful business. So it's one of the things that I'm learning through this podcast is that it's never too late. You just have to collect the guts. Help your mom do that.
Yes, you have to do it. And I think so much in this, sometimes we look at things and we're like, if we weren't an immediate success and didn't know exactly what we wanted to do the moment we came out of college, it makes no sense. Like we can't be successful anymore. And more you have to look at it and you have to realize that the journey starts when you're ready for it.
Yes, absolutely. And my mom was always teaching me life comes in phases. There's a phase for this and there's a phase for that. You know, there's a phase when you're at home with your children. There's a phase where you run after a career. You don't have to think because it's not happening right now that it won't happen.
I love that idea of thinking it through in phases.
Yeah. Liz, thank you so much. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
I think that is everything. I think it's just a matter of whatever you do in life, whatever lessons you take from your mom, from your own self, just make sure that anything that you do really aligns with your values, who you want to be. And if you don't like it, make the change and enter that new phase of life.
That's very important. Thank you for these last words.
Absolutely.
Let's recap Mama Aida's lessons quickly. So I have education is key. I have don't put your career aspirations on hold, especially not for a man, and strive for excellence. And then for what she was not able to teach you was about the double standards between our sons and daughters and how to find the inner peace and passion. Our passion in life. Did I put that correctly?
Yeah, that was it. Those were all the lessons that I learned and didn't learn and learned them along the way in my own way.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me. If anyone's interested in following me, they can find me on Instagram and Facebook at manifestationelizabeth or at elizabethrachel.co. Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. If you enjoy Thank You, Mama, and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You, Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.